So
This week, isn't it?
So Tony said, come up on stage and just have a chat with Nick about stuff, which sounded okay. I'm not sure what things you're interested in, but because we have a quite wide range of things we could talk about. But I thought we should probably focus sort of in the fintechy sort of area for the people here. So I'm glancing up. I noticed there are some younger people in the audience, so I hope we haven't made a terrible demographic mistake. But I think there might be one or two people in the audience who don't actually understand what a significant role Jersey has actually played in the history of fintech. If we go back to those early, so I know you don't particularly want to, but if we just, a couple of minutes, if you could just explain to people here how Jersey got things going.
Yeah, okay. I think some of you have heard this story before, so you can snooze at this stage because the seats are really comfortable. Every time I come back to Jersey, which is more frequent now, I'm disappointed that there's not a blue plaque at the airport which says the world's e-commerce was invented in Broad Street, because it was. In 1994, we built the world's first online shop in Broad Street called the Wine Warehouse, which Wine Warehouse is still going. And we did that because we had a 486 computer called Zippy connected to four 14K4 modems, which Frank Walker's newspaper called the Information Super Slowway. And those of you who remember those modems, remember the horrible cat squeaking noise that they made and the frustration that you had in getting hold of what was then SuperNet's customer service team, trying to get these damn things to work. But last year there was a book written by a guy called Ogden, and he got hold of me. He said, look, you know, there was you in Jersey and these virtual vineyards guys over in California who actually did this first. And I said, well, we were both at a conference in San Francisco in 1997, and we sort of shook hands and agreed we were probably about the same sort of time. He said, well, I'm going to go and find out. And we beat them by 3 months. So Jersey is where e-commerce was invented. So you should all be proud of that. And I think the funny thing about that as well was my first introduction to Jersey Telecoms was a letter from Bob Lawrence, who probably isn't here, basically saying to me, Nick, great idea, but you're in breach of the monopoly telecommunication regulations that we have on the island. So you can go to jail for 6 months to Lemoy for this. And given the choice between going to Lemoy or dealing with the frustrated customers that we had in Jersey, Lemoy seemed the sensible option. But
so even then it was a supportive environment.
It was a supportive environment. And then we ended up just spending tons of money with them, which is funny how they go from litigation to actually sending you bills.
But starting e-commerce enabled you to see one or two of the immediate problems that companies were going to face. And one of those obvious problems, and this is when we first knew each other, one of those obvious problems was payments. And unlike me, standing in the pub moaning about why don't payments work properly, you decided to actually do something about it. That's the difference between advisors and entrepreneurs. So what did you do?
Well, we sort of set this, we had the ZippyR computer and an X25 switch connected to Barclays Bank in '94. And we basically got a piece of technology from Tech Supplies, which is still going, which allowed us to connect those two devices. And it was the wire that created e-commerce, not the coding that created it. And we ended up then creating a thing called Barclays Square, which was the world's first bank-endorsed e-commerce mall, which we launched in 1995. And from that, we then found that although the internet was creating a global marketplace, there wasn't a global currency. And so we went on then to develop WorldPay, which was a multi-currency system, which allowed you to make a value for judgment decision when you went online. Because there's no point in presenting a product for sale in a currency you don't understand, because you don't make a value for judgment decision. You can't do that, and so you won't buy it. And so WorldPay's secret sauce was being able to present the currencies to the potential purchasers so they could make a value for judgment decision. And then the payment piece sort of came along there afterwards. And I think probably most of you know that WorldPay is now, I think, the biggest e-commerce company in the world. Just recently sold for about $48 billion in the States. And again, that started in Broad Street.
So, and just to get it out of the way in case it comes up in the conversation later on, I am on record as saying I thought that business was worthless and not going anywhere. So just anything I say is for entertainment purposes only.
Yeah, so if you need something to
does
do...
does not constitute investment advice.
If you need somebody to do DD, he's great at it, trust him.
But there was a reasoning behind that, and the reasoning was that what you'd done was, you take all the credit in the world for doing it, because other people didn't do it.
Yeah.
But my assessment was anybody could do this. It was easy. They didn't do it, but they could have. That's not quite true of your next business. So in many ways, I think what you did with Clearbank, to people like me in the industry, is actually astonishing. And so I wonder if you just spend a couple of minutes explaining to people where Clearbank came from and what you actually achieved creating that business.
Okay. Anybody here from RBS or NatWest?
There must be.
You should leave now. Basically, going through building WorldPay, we were always at the behest of a large UK bank. And whilst we could engage with our customers, we couldn't control our service levels because we were sitting behind legacy technology, and all of you hear about legacy technology. And after we sold WorldPay to RBS for not enough money, just in case there isn't really here, we went on to develop other technologies, and everything that we did, we found that we were stuck behind this legacy of infrastructure and legacy of control. And some of you may know this, but back in 1960, the UK had 16 clearing banks. And then by the time we got to 2014, that really had condensed down to 4. And the journalists in the room will say cartel and all the various other words that spin around in relation to that. But the reality was that it was just market concentration, and the market had changed, but the legacy infrastructure unfortunately hadn't. And so I was having coffee with a lady called Mary Starks, who was the interim payment service regulator in 2014. In the UK, it was some people from the Treasury. And we were just talking about the sad state of the UK marketplace. And I said to her, Mary, what are you going to talk about today? And she said, I'm going to talk about access to payment systems for financial services businesses. And I looked at her and I said, well, this is going to be a very, very short presentation then, because there isn't any. It just doesn't exist. You were stuck behind the 4 incumbents. And I said to her, I don't understand why the UK hasn't had a new clearing bank. Because if you look at the way that the UK retailing marketplace has changed, with the arrival of Aldi and Lidl, you had 2 upstart companies coming from Germany, and Tesco's and Waitrose and the big supermarket chains said they're just selling cheap product badly. And the reality was they were selling cheap product cleverly by focusing on something and executing against it in a very, very focused way. And I said to her, I'm certain that the reality behind this is that if I was to toodle down to Threadneedle Street, knock on the door, and ask to speak to Mark Carney, and say, I'd like to set up a clearing bank, Mark, what do you think? The guys with the pink bowler hats would slam the door in my face and say that we have a political or regulatory structure which prevents that from happening. So Mary went away. She said, that's very interesting. She said, I'll get back to you. And everybody in this room has been to conferences where you've met really interesting people who evaporate immediately after the conference. They just disappear. You can email them, silence. And so my expectation was relatively low. Anyway, Mary came back to me and she said, I've been round and talked to some people about your idea. And I've talked to the Bank of England, the PRA, the FCA, Competition Markets Authority, and the Treasury. And nobody knows why there hasn't been a new clearing bank. And actually, everybody thinks it might be a good idea. So if you want to have a go, there's a guy at the FCA waiting for you to call them. So I gave this guy a ring and I said, look, I'm Nick Ogden. We've got this really stupid idea to set up a new clearing bank. Can we come and have a meeting with you? So the journey started. And we spent 3 months talking to the FCA about, the really riveting stuff of KYC, AML, all the stuff that really excites everybody in this room. And we got to a point in 2014 where we went along for our first big meeting with the Bank of England and the PRA with the 100% support of the UK FCA to actually try and get this project done. I sat in this meeting room in Moorgate, and we had sort of like 15 people from the Bank of England and PRA there. And one of the guys said to me, he said, and where are you proposing to build this bank, Mr. Ogden? I said, I'm proposing to build this bank in the cloud. And they all looked out of the window. absolutely true, all right? And so we had to then sit down and sort of explain what cloud computing was about and about cloud technologies and all the rest of it. And they said, so whose software are you going to use to build this bank in the cloud? And I said, we're actually going to build it all ourselves. Because one of the things that we've learned from looking at the banks and working with the banks for the last 20 odd years is that every time you buy a piece of technology, you inherit a legacy. Now, the software vendors don't tell you that, but you do. And so if you accept, as we did in those days, that cloud computing was going to transform the world, and cloud computing was using new technologies of microservices and various other things, if we engineered a system using these new technologies, we could get to a position where it was future-proofed, which is what we did.
See, I'm not sure people know. So when I first came to see you about this in Bishopsgate, remember that?
Yeah.
That had that brightly coloured glass thing downstairs. It was all too modern for me, but I'm not sure if people in the audience understand the magnitude of what you did, because there's three things. There's constructing the new regulated entity, which took 2 years and millions of pounds and millions of pages of documentation and so on, which is an incredible thing to do. There's creating the new business, which is seeing that opportunity for banking reinvented, in this kind of API-centric, Amazonized space, banking as an infrastructure to other people. And then there was building the actual technology platform itself. And to take on all three of those things together, and frankly, Nick, to make them work, I think was astonishing. And I don't think, because a lot of it's under the iceberg, under the surface. I don't mean it's Titanic or anything. I really don't mean that. I think a lot of people don't quite see yet what a really big deal that is. But now it's coming to Jersey, right?
Yeah, you can. I mean, the regulators here. I mean, what Tony was going through here in relation to change of attitude, collaboration between all the different departments, which didn't exist when we were trying to set up WorldPay here, Frank. That's all changed now, and you've got a great leader in the Financial Services Commission with Martin Maloney. I've had the pleasure to meet a few times, and regulated companies. Clearbank only serves regulated businesses in the UK, so we have nationwide building society on one side down to smaller businesses on the other side. We've now been allowed to provide services in Jersey to allow Jersey companies to get access to high-speed transactional banking services in the UK.
And in practice, that should cut the cost of doing business in Jersey fairly substantially, I would imagine.
I think it's two things. There's always cost, which always seems to be the thing that people worry about, but it's actually inefficiency and innovation. Right? Moving money around is a pain. It's actually quicker to take a bag of money from here, go and get some euros from the bank, fly to Gatwick, fly to Paris. It'll get there faster than an international payment instruction. That's wrong.
So stop teasing the banks in here. It's not right.
They just left.
So this reinvention of banking services as something that sit the other side of an API, but are executed in a way that you and I would see more coming from the kind of technology space. This is the world of service level agreements and grade of service and quality service, stuff like that. That is a very different way to provide banking services, and the implications of the transformations it will make because of open banking and so on, I think are very wide. You and I were both in Paris for a large part of the week. It's got nothing to do with the conversation. It's just, we were in Paris.
We've been at a wine festival.
But one of the Paris Fintech Forum, there were sort of two underlying discussions going on all the time. I thought one was about AI, which we're going to hear about with Wendy a bit later on. But the other was this thing about this idea of financial service becoming embedded in other things. Yeah. This Amazon API-centric view of the world where you're ahead of the curve. I think that's going to lead to the foundation of entirely new businesses that we don't have right now. Yeah. Jersey really has an opportunity to be in the forefront of this?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think that, you are third in the world in relation to infrastructure. Do you deserve that? I think you do, right? Because, of course, you invented e-commerce here. But you've got to embrace that. And it's not, yesterday we had an interesting session just talking about opportunity from, banking and trust companies and all the rest of it. And I threw a stupid question out. I said, anybody in here got an idea of what they would do to change things? And there must have been well over a dozen, probably 15
people had ideas.
Put their hands up. We don't know who they were. They was all like this. But anyway, they all confessed to having ideas. But it's the execution that's the hard bit. Having an idea is an easy bit. And it's the execution and pulling the teams together. And, you know, we live on a small island here. We have limited manpower and resources, but we've got the best technology in the world. And, you know, one of my businesses, we run as a remote business. You know, we use Zoom, we have Teams, we have Monday, all of the technology platforms that you need today to run a distributed business where you don't need people in the office. You know, in 20 years' time, I think that whoever's invested in the office space out here maybe would be ruining the day, because you don't need office space. You can get the best techies in the world far more cheaply by allowing them to work from home.
Which provides a way for Jersey to leverage its advantages in US business. But, you know, when I was looking at the video earlier on, I was thinking, you know, some of the key problems that we face at the high level, you know, in terms of the jurisdictional competition, there's no substitute for making Jersey more efficient by reducing the cost of financial intermediation. Yep. And the KYC, AML compliance stuff is a solid barrier to stop. We can't spend our way out of that. We can't hire enough people to do that. The only way out of that is technology, and being able to leverage through this infrastructure translates into real business advantage for the island as a whole. And I think Tony is right to focus on that sort of area.
I think sort of the other thing on that as well is that there's a group now, I think it's a 57, I've probably got the number wrong, of regulators around the world who have all joined this regulatory club. And Jersey's part of that. So, you know, you've also got the ability to come up with an idea here, go down, buy a cup of coffee and have a cup of coffee with the leader of the FSC, and they're all off to New York shortly to talk to this club. And so your ability to have a great idea here and get it adopted globally is better now than it's ever been.
Right, so that's the sort of preamble out of the way. So question two. So now let's talk about the new business.
Okay.
So you've created. So there are people in this room who think that things like Bitcoin and whatever are like modern and sexy and stuff like that, okay, because you can use them to send money all around the world and so on. You've created a new business which doesn't need any of that stuff.
Correct.
And actually works. So tell us what the new business is.
Okay, it's called RTGS, and most of you, if you go to the UK or you're involved in finance, you know that RTGS stands for Real-Time Gross Settlement, right? Which is a domestic system. It's like faster payments and chaps and all the rest of it. But believe it or not, there isn't a global system that does that. You've got messaging with SWIFT, but you don't have a system that actually manages global payments, but more importantly, global liquidity. Because the reason why our financial systems are so slow is that interbank liquidity is invisible. And whilst you might work for a bank and think, we've got a great bank, we've got a great balance sheet and all the rest of it, the counterparties that you work with, you don't know how good they are. And a lot of the friction that's introduced into the world's financial system is through this lack of liquidity visibility. So we started putting a platform together last year called RTGS Global, and it goes into pilot in June. And what it allows us to do is to see liquidity in real time at an interbank level, which sounds great, and you're all sitting there thinking, what the hell is he talking about? What it means is that you can make a payment from New York to Australia in 300 milliseconds on a Sunday afternoon. What it means is that you can start to address the $15 trillion a year that we as a global economy waste on financial friction. So as we sit here, we've been here, nearly 20 minutes, right? That's $87,000 a second of financial friction that the world's financial systems create. And so what we've started to do...
That's not some marketing thing you made up, right? That came from the UN.
No, it actually came, the World Bank,
Bank.
And the Bank of International Settlements and IMF are involved in this project. Last year, we came up with a number of our own, and we thought it was about $2.7 trillion. And a guy at the IMF said, I think that number's wrong. And you know when you're in a meeting and somebody says that, and you think, oh my God, we've completely messed up here. You know, we're too high. And he said, I think it's a bigger number than that. We'll go away and find out. So we had a big meeting in Washington, D.C. before Christmas. And they turned around and said, no, it's actually $15 trillion. So we're going out with a press release in the course of the next 6 weeks, basically trying to highlight this cost. And you'll see on the RTGS website in a couple of weeks' time a real-time counter, which I've got running on my phone, that shows this horrifying fact in true light.
So just so people understand the change this is going to bring, right now I can pull up my phone and I can send money to anybody in the UK instantly.
Yep,
right? And that's been working for years.
Yep.
FPS was faster payments was the first, of these instant credit transfer systems.
Yep.
It's creaking a little bit now. It's going to be replaced with the 222 series soon. But nevertheless, people are used to that now,
Yep.
right? You owe somebody some money, you just pull up the phone and send it to them. But that's going to go global.
Correct.
So somebody here will be able to pull up their phone and instantly transfer money to an account anywhere in the G7 to begin with, but anywhere in the world in the long run.
Yeah,
that's an incredible change.
Yeah, well, we start in June. We do G7. By the end of August, we'll have G15. By the end of the year, we'll be at the G50. And this is all testing because we're doing something called atomic settlement, which your eyes are glazing over again, I can see.
No, these are finance people, Nick.
Well, yeah, but
like
atomic settlement is challenging because at the moment, all of our money follows the sun. And with atomic settlement, it doesn't need to, which is quite ironic because what it means is that business in Australia can make a payment to companies in America a day before it's due because it goes back over the dateline. And so imagine the machine room of Silicon Valley Bank is going to have real fun working that one out from a reconciliation point of view.
So just to link all of these things together then, because I like the sort of narrative versions of these things, and just to bring it back round to where we started, in Jersey.
Yeah.
In the not too distant future, we're going to get the situation where I will go to a website, for example, I'll buy something from a merchant using WorldPay. I won't be using credit cards because that's this old 1960s thing. I'll press a button to send the money direct from my bank account to the merchant's bank account.
Yeah.
That will go through ClearBank into the faster payment system and through RTGS to a merchant the other side of the world.
Yeah.
So basically, we'll all be serfs tilling your fields. Is that the... I'm joking.
I haven't looked at it like that.
No, but the point is, I want people to understand. I want people to understand that people. When I come from the outside, you come here, and I think people don't understand, or perhaps don't spend enough time thinking about what's going on here and the advantages. And you've demonstrated you can build these amazing businesses here, and take the stuff out all over the world. So, and of course, again, because we all want to see more vigor and enterprise around this digital economy, I wonder if we could finish up just by, not critically, but I'm just wondering if you would want to make one or two suggestions to the community as a whole, because we need the next generation of entrepreneurs like you here. What are one or two things that Digital Jersey can do for the people in the audience here to help foster and develop that? Like Martin said, reduce the risks of these things. What practical things can they do?
Well, we're hoping with RTGS to actually operate the Global Technology Centre from the Esplanade. So the whole support of this network will be running from Jersey. And I think that the opportunity that you've got here is that, it's like Sandbox. It's a microcosm of the real world. You've got all the social economic groups. You've got all of the industries that you need to focus on in relation to fintech and financial services. You've got banks, you've got trust companies and all the rest of it. You've got a lot of very, very clever people here. And what I think you need to do is to get behind, embrace some of the work that Tony's doing, and actually also, Frank, and I were talking last night, shake yourselves up a bit, all right? Because the world is changing. I got a taxi back home last night, and I was chatting to the taxi driver, and he said, I really worry about what my grandchildren are going to be doing. And actually, the jobs that his grandchildren are going to be doing are going to come out of the work that you guys in here should be doing in relation to driving the innovation of the future forward. And I think that the opportunity here is huge. It's never gone away. I've just been lucky to have the right teams of people, both here and internationally, to support the businesses that I've got. But I don't have any secret sauce. I just have been lucky in relation to how I've executed. And it's the execution opportunity which you've got to embrace and drive forward. And you've got all the tools. Use it, go for it, build it.
I could just add one thing to that, because we've had some conversations about this before. We have the infrastructure at the technological level, and that's been fantastic. So we have the mobile phones and broadband and stuff like that. We could do with nudging a little bit more at the infrastructure at the next level up. So the infrastructure that's coming next, the stuff that we talk all, digital identity and AI and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fair to say that if people could be persuaded to divert a little more of their effort into that, and perhaps a little less into the business as usual, that would give us some of the energy that we need to take that forward.
I think as we were saying yesterday, everybody in here has already got a digital identity. Everybody's got one on Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever. We just need to develop that.
I don't know handing it all over to Facebook, but okay.
Okay.
Listen, Nick, thank you very much for sharing. I know you didn't know what I was going to ask you.
No, not a clue.
I really appreciate you sharing your honest opinions about these things, because we all greatly value your expertise and your input. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. Pleasure.